The early morning sky above Denver International Airport shimmered with streaks of rose and silver, a soft prelude to what promised to be a calm day. At gate C-17, passengers shuffled in line, clutching coffees, headphones, and the faint excitement that comes with travel. To most of them, Flight 2971 to Washington, D.C. was just another cross-country trip, another blur of airports, security lines, and recycled cabin air. But in the cockpit, Captain Olivia Jensen sat quietly, running her pre-flight checks with the focus of someone who saw flying not as a job, but as an unspoken pact between sky and soul. Her fingers glided across the instrument panels, her eyes sharp and steady. The flight deck hummed softly, glowing with the pale light of 100 indicators. "Autopilot, test complete," said First Officer Ryan McCarthy, breaking the silence. Olivia nodded, her gaze fixed on the digital horizon line. "Good. Let's keep our climb smooth today. There's some instability over Kansas. Nothing dangerous, but—" She trailed off. Ryan smirked. "You mean the turbulence reports that would make a new pilot cancel lunch?" "Something like that." Her voice was even low and calm, the kind of tone that could steady a room on fire. Outside, ground crews loaded luggage. Flight attendants moved gracefully through pre-board routines. And the tower's voice came over the headset. "Flight 2971. Cleared for pushback, runway 25. Olivia's hand moved to the throttle. "Copy that, tower." Flight 2971 pushing back. She always found a strange beauty in these moments before flight, the mechanical ballet of taxiing, the rising hum of engines, a tremor of power building beneath her hands. To others, it was routine. To her, it was a return, a quiet echo of a life she'd left behind in uniform. Because long before she wore the crisp navy blazer of a commercial airline captain, she had worn the olive flight suit of a U.S. Air Force pilot. Her call sign was Hawk, and though no one on this flight knew it, the name still haunted every takeoff. As Flight 2971 rolled onto the runway, Olivia gave one final glance at the instruments. Everything looked perfect. Pressure stable, wind calm, radar clear, except for a few cells far to the east. She eased the throttle forward. "Engines set," Ryan confirmed. "V1, she said softly as the plane gained speed. "Rotate." The nose lifted, and the world fell away beneath them. Denver shrank to a miniature grid of gold and blue, vanishing into cloud. The passengers felt the gentle tilt of ascent, some smiling at the sight of sunlight breaking through the clouds, others already asleep or glued to their screens. Olivia always took a silent breath at 10,000 feet, her private ritual. "Wings level," she murmured, exhaling slowly. Ryan leaned back. "You know, Captain, you never told me what made you go commercial. Someone like you could have stayed in the military. Easy." Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "Some wars don't end in the air, Ryan. They end when you finally come home." He didn't press. Something in her tone told him it was a door best left closed. They climbed to cruising altitude 38,000 feet, slicing smoothly through the thin blue atmosphere. Outside, sunlight spread across the clouds like liquid gold. The seatbelt sign chimed off. Flight attendants moved through the aisles with practiced smiles. Laughter, the clinking of coffee cups, the low hum of engines. It was peaceful, almost hypnotic. And yet, Olivia couldn't shake the faint static whisper in her headset. "Denver Center, Flight 2971 checking in at 380. The reply came delayed, fragmented. ... light, ... 3. Copy, static crackled again. She frowned. "That's odd." Ryan looked up. "Comms glitch?" "Maybe," she said, adjusting the frequency. "But the radar's lagging too. Could be early interference." She zoomed out the radar screen. A mass of weather activity was forming 200 miles east, shifting faster than expected. A heavy system, swirling thick and unstable. "Wasn't there this morning?" Ryan muttered. "No," Olivia replied quietly. "And it's moving right across our path." For a while, she said nothing more. Her mind calculated alternatives. Altitude changes, alternate routes, aversion airports. Her instincts were whispering the way they used to in combat zones. Anticipate before it hits. By the time the passengers finished breakfast service, she had already requested a deviation 10 degrees south to avoid the turbulence. The tower approved. The plane banked slightly, smooth as silk. But the whisper didn't leave her. It was in her chest, the quiet tension before a storm, the soundless hum of the world holding its breath. Outside the cockpit windows, the horizon had turned an unsettling shade of gray. An hour into the flight, Olivia leaned back in her seat, stretching slightly. She thought of the last time she'd flown into a storm like this. Afghanistan, 2014, under missile fire and radio blackout, guiding a crippled C-17 through darkness. That day, her call sign, Hawk, had been the last voice some soldiers ever heard. "Everything all right?" Ryan asked, noticing her expression. "Yeah," she lied. "Just thinking." He chuckled. "Thinking doesn't look good on you, Captain. You start staring out the window like it owes you answers." She smiled faintly. "Maybe it does." A brief silence filled the cockpit. Then, the radio crackled again, louder this time. Center control, flight, contact, warning. Cell activity. The words broke apart in static. Olivia exchanged a look with Ryan. "Center, say again?" She asked. Nothing. The line went dead. Minutes passed. Then, the radar display flickered once, twice, and went black. Ryan's hands tightened on his lap. "That's not good." Olivia rebooted the system, fingers moving swiftly, voice level. "We still have visual. Keep an eye on the heading." Below them, the clouds churned, dense and alive. Forks of lightning flashed far off, like distant camera flashes in the mist. She keyed the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've encountered some mild system interference and may experience light turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Her tone was warm, calm, even, but inside she felt the weight of unease settle in her gut. When she finished the announcement, Ryan glanced at her. "Light turbulence?" She shot him a dry look. No need to start a panic before it starts. As they crossed into the storm cell, the first jolt hit, a sharp drop that sent coffee cups flying. Passengers gasped, some clutching their armrests. Olivia steadied the plane, adjusting pitch and throttle with small, controlled movements. "Feels like we hit the edge of it," Ryan said, eyes darting over the flickering gauges. Olivia nodded. "Hold her steady. We'll ride it out." But the storm was faster and meaner than they expected. Within minutes, dark clouds swallowed the aircraft whole. Rain pounded against the fuselage like stones. Static danced across the windshield. Lightning flared, illuminating the cockpit in white. For a fraction of a second, Olivia saw her reflection, calm, focused, unyielding. Then the instruments went dark. All of them. The hum of systems died. And in that breathless silence above 30,000 feet, Flight 2971 became a fragile speck, swallowed by thunder. Ryan's voice broke the quiet. "Captain, we just lost comms." Olivia's jaw tightened. "Then we fly by hand." The sky outside roared, angry and alive. The plane trembled under invisible pressure, tossed by cross winds. But her hands, steady as steel, stayed on the controls. She looked at the gray void ahead, her heart slow and certain. "Not today," she whispered. And with that, Captain Olivia Hawk Jensen, the woman who once saved lives in war, braced herself to do it again, this time in peace. For a moment, the world inside the cockpit stood perfectly still. Then a blinding flash tore through the clouds. A jagged spear of lightning struck the left wing, followed instantly by another that slammed into the tail. The aircraft shuddered like a living thing in pain. The cabin lights went black. "Power loss!" Ryan shouted. "I see it." Olivia's voice was calm, but clipped. The panel in front of her went dark, except for a handful of flickering indicators. The autopilot disengaged with a harsh metallic click, and alarms began to wail in a terrible chorus. "Manual control engaged," she said, seizing the yoke. The plane lurched left, dropping 2,000 feet in seconds. Passengers screamed. Oxygen masks snapped down like 1,000 white ghosts. A baby cried out a small, human sound, swallowed by the howl of wind. Ryan's hands flew across the dark instruments. "We've lost both nav systems backups fried. Hydraulics? Green for now, barely. Then we fly her old school," she said. Trim, visual, and gut. Outside, the storm was a wall of churning gray. Rain hit the windshield so hard it sounded like gravel. Static electricity crawled across the glass, glowing faintly blue St. Elmo's fire. The jet dropped again, heavier this time, a free fall that made everyone weightless for a heartbeat. Ryan's voice cracked. "We're descending through 33,000 and losing altitude fast." Olivia's mind went silent the way it always did in combat. No noise, no fear, just calculation. She pulled back on the yoke, feeling the muscle memory return like an old friend. The aircraft resisted, groaning under pressure, then steadied just enough to flatten the dive. "Come on, girl," she whispered to the jet. "Don't quit on me." The wind screamed louder. A lightning bolt exploded outside, close enough to blind them. For a second, everything was pure white. Then the world snapped back into darkness. "Try comes again," she said. Ryan twisted the frequency knob. "Denver Center, this is Flight 2971, declaring Mayday. Do you copy?" "Static. Center, do you read?" More static. "Dead air," he muttered. "Then we keep trying." In the cabin, flight attendants crawled down the aisle on their knees, shouting over the wind, telling people to tighten seatbelts and stay low. The plane bucked like a roller coaster. Someone prayed out loud. Another person sobbed into their hands. Olivia could almost feel them, 200 heartbeats behind a thin metal door, each one counting on her. "Ryan," she said quietly, "dump some fuel. Lighten the load." He hesitated. "You serious? In this wind?" "Do it. She needs lift." He obeyed, toggling the valves. A faint hiss vibrated through the fuselage as precious fuel vented into the raging air. Olivia adjusted pitch again. The controls were stiff. The storm's downdraft was brutal. "We're not out of this yet," she said, but she's responding. "You always talk to your planes like they can hear you?" "Only when I need them to listen." Ryan actually laughed a quick, nervous sound, but it helped. It reminded them both they were still alive. 15 minutes passed like a lifetime. The instruments flickered back to partial life altimeter, compass, and one engine temperature gauge. Everything else stayed black. The cabin lights returned in dim amber, and a cheer rippled faintly from behind the cockpit door. "Looks like auxiliary power kicked in," Ryan said. "Good. Keep it steady at 27,000. The relief lasted less than a minute. A sudden blast of wind slammed into the right side, throwing the jet into a violent roll. Drinks, phones, and carry-ons flew through the cabin. Olivia fought the yoke with both arms. Her shoulder burned, but she held it, muscles screaming. Counter rudder. She ordered. On it. The jet leveled, but they'd lost another 2,000 feet. Warning lights blinked angrily. Altitude 25,000 and falling. Ryan shouted. Stabilize climb angle 10 degrees nose up. We're clearing the worst of it soon. You're sure? No, she admitted, but confidence keeps wings in the air. Inside her head, time folded back. She wasn't in a Boeing anymore. She was in an F-15E over Kandahar. Both engines smoking, comms dead, her wingman missing. She could still hear her commander shouting, Hawk, pull up, pull up. And she had pulled up, barely dragging the crippled jet over the mountains. She had survived then, too. Ryan's voice brought her back. Captain, our transponder's out. They can't see us on radar. Then right now, she said, we're ghosts. At that same moment, far below them, controllers at Denver Center were staring at empty radar screens. Flight 2971 just disappeared, one said, disbelief creeping in. Recheck frequencies, his supervisor ordered. If we've lost them, notify NORAD. They're drifting east toward restricted airspace. Within minutes, a coded alert flashed across the Air Force network. Unidentified civilian aircraft. Comms failure, erratic altitude. Possible emergency. 2 F-22 Raptors from Langley AFB were scrambled. Cal signs. Ghost 1 and Ghost 2. Back in the storm, Olivia was too busy wrestling the plane to notice the jets yet. The storm center churned ahead like a living wall. We need to find a way around that, she said. Can't see a thing, Ryan answered. It's solid cloud. She squinted. Lightning flashed again, revealing for an instant a narrow gap in the clouds like a door opening. There, bearing 095. We thread that needle, or we don't make it. Thread it? That's suicide. No, she said. That's flying. She turned the yoke, guiding the aircraft into the gap. Wind buffeted both sides. Thunder cracked like gunfire. But through that slit of pale sky, she could see light, a lighter shade of gray that promised altitude beyond the storm. Hold your breath, she murmured. The plane punched through, shuddering. For 3 agonizing seconds, it felt like the wings would rip clean off. Then they broke into calmer air. The sudden stillness was deafening. Ryan slumped back, drenched in sweat. We're above it. Barely. She checked the gauges. Altitude 19,000 and climbing. Good girl. He exhaled shakily. You're insane. She smiled faintly. That's why they pay me the big bucks. But the victory was short-lived. The fuel gauge now blinked red dangerously low after the dump and long fight. They were alive but stranded, with no communication, limited navigation, and uncertain direction. Ryan rubbed his forehead. What now? Now, she said. We keep climbing until we can talk to someone. She reached for the radio, cycling through emergency channels. Static, and just for a heartbeat a human voice. Unidentified aircraft, this is Eastern Air Defense. Respond on guard frequency 121.5. Olivia's pulse quickened. Eastern Air Defense, this is Flight 2971. We've lost all primary systems, declaring emergency. The response was faint. Say again, Flight 2971. Unable to verify identity. You are entering restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately. Ryan's eyes widened. Restricted? Oh, that's great. Relax, she said, tuning the signal. We'll clear it. But the radio hissed again, swallowed by interference. And then, far ahead through thinning clouds, 2 dark shapes appeared, sleek, fast, and unmistakable. Captain, Ryan said slowly, those aren't clouds. Olivia leaned forward. Twin jets sliced through the mist, closing fast. Their angular silhouettes glinted silver in the sunlight. Her stomach tightened, not in fear, but recognition. F-22 Raptors. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Memories flashed, the same aircraft type she'd once flown alongside overseas. The same pilots who'd called her Hawk over the radio. Now they were approaching her, unaware who sat behind the commercial cockpit glass. Inside the F-22 lead's helmet, a young pilot's voice came over comms. Ghost 1 to control. Visual contact with unidentified civilian jet. No response to hails. Requesting engagement protocol Charlie. Copy, Ghost 1. Intercept and establish comms. The pilot banked closer. Looks like a 737 variant. Heavy damage on starboard. I'll try guard frequency. He switched channels. Unidentified aircraft. This is Ghost 1 of the United States Air Force. You're entering restricted airspace. Respond immediately. Inside Flight 2971, Olivia heard the faint crackle, the voice cutting through the static like a blade. Ryan's head snapped up. Did you hear that? Yes, she whispered. She knew that tone. Military, clipped, calm. A language she hadn't heard in years. Switching frequency, she said, fingers dancing over the dial. Ryan frowned. What are you doing? Talking to my past. She pressed the transmit button. This is Eagle 27 requesting immediate air corridor clearance. Silence filled the frequency. Then came a stunned reply. Eagle 27? Hawk, is that you? Olivia closed her eyes for half a second, relief washing through the tension. The corner of her mouth lifted. Copy that, Ghost 1, she said. Hawk still flying. The storm rumbled far below them, but above the clouds, the sky opened wide and bright. 2 F-22s flanked the wounded airliner like guardian angels. And for the first time since the lightning strike, Captain Olivia Jensen allowed herself a breath that didn't taste like fear. The storm had thinned to a bruised veil of violet and gray, but the damage it left behind was merciless. Flight 2971's fuselage rattled in every gust. The smell of burned ozone lingered through the vents. Inside the cockpit, warning lights blinked weakly, a constellation of wounded systems. Ryan stared at the instruments. We're running on backup everything. Half our sensors are reading garbage. Olivia kept her eyes forward. Then we ignore the numbers and trust the feel. She moved the yoke a few millimeters, gauging the plane's response through vibration alone. She's heavy on the left wing. I can balance that. Far below, the Atlantic seaboard glimmered through cloud breaks. Unbeknownst to them, a dozen radar operators at Eastern Air Defense Sector were staring at their screens, watching a single erratic blip flicker in and out of existence. Track Alpha 19 just reappeared at 19.5, a controller called. Speed 300 knots, no transponder, no squawk. His supervisor frowned. That's the Ghost from Denver Center. Get ID and scramble intercepts. Within minutes, the 2 Raptors already escorting the target received confirmation. Their unknown civilian jet was officially classified as potential emergency or hijack. Ghost 1 to command. Target maintains course east-northeast. No hostile motion. The F-22 leader reported. He could just make out the 737's tail through the thinning cloud. Its paint scorched, one stabilizer visibly dented. Command crackled back. Maintain visual. Attempt comes. Row Charlie defensive posture only. Copy that. He switched to the emergency frequency again. Unidentified aircraft. This is Ghost 1. State your intentions. For a heartbeat, there was only static. Then a familiar, composed female voice. This is Eagle 27, Captain Olivia Jensen, Civil Flight 2-9-7-1, declaring full systems emergency. 200 passengers on board. Request immediate escort to safe air corridor. The Raptor pilot blinked behind his visor. That call sign Eagle 27 wasn't random. It belonged to a legend from his academy textbooks. A pilot who'd saved an entire strike team in the Helmand Valley a decade earlier. He switched to private channel. Ghost 2. Did she just say Eagle 27? Affirmative, his wingman replied, awe threading his tone. You don't think? I think the universe just handed us a miracle. In the airliner, Ryan was oblivious to the recognition blooming in the fighter cockpits. He was staring at their fuel gauge, its needle sinking like a clock hand toward zero. Captain, at this rate, we've got maybe 50 minutes before reserve. Olivia nodded once. Plenty if we plan right. Let's get a heading from them. She keyed the radio again. Ghost 1, Hawk here. We need vectors to nearest safe landing strip with weather clear enough to see it. Hawk, the voice came back, equal parts disbelief and respect. This is Ghost 1 Major Reed Calloway. We've got you on visual. You're trending east of Norfolk. Closest field with workable length is Dover A, FB. Do you copy? Copy, Dover. Appreciate it, Major. Ryan mouthed the word Hawk. She didn't answer. She just kept flying. At Dover Air Force Base, crews scrambled to light an emergency runway. A control officer, an older colonel, heard the intercept feed and froze mid-stride. Olivia Jensen? The Hawk? She's still alive? He barked new orders. Get those emergency crews ready. If she's really at the stick, that aircraft's coming down in one piece. Meanwhile, turbulence returned softer now, but relentless. Olivia gritted her teeth as another downdraft pulled them 500 feet down. Hold her, she muttered. Ryan wiped sweat from his forehead. How are you this calm? She glanced at him, the faintest smile tugging her lips. You learn calm when panic gets people killed. He wanted to ask what that meant, but the look in her eyes distant. Haunted told him the story was written in blood somewhere overseas. Below the cockpit, the passengers felt every drop and shudder. A teenage boy clutched his mother's hand. An elderly man whispered a prayer. The head flight attendant, Jenna, moved row by row, checking belts, whispering reassurance. When the aircraft steadied for a moment, she ducked into the cockpit. Captain, she said softly, people are terrified. Can I tell them something? Olivia nodded. Tell them their captain's flown through worse. Jenna hesitated. Is that true? Olivia met her eyes. It is now. High above, the two Raptors flanked them like silver knives, their contrails carving pale scars across the upper cloud. Inside Ghost 1, Major Calloway opened a secure line to his commander. Sir, identification confirmed. Civilian pilot is Olivia Jensen Calcine Hawk. A pause, then a low whistle through the radio. That woman once brought home a burning C-17 with half its controls shot out. You stick with her, Major. She knows how to fight gravity. Yes, sir. Calloway smiled behind his mask. He'd been a rookie lieutenant on that very mission, saved by her impossible landing. Now fate had looped back around. Flight 2971, he said over the emergency band. We're going to ride with you to Dover. Weather's still dirty below 10,000, but we'll mark the approach vector with our radar beacons. You'll see our strobes follow them in. Copy all, Ghost 1, Olivia replied. Appreciate the shepherds. Always, ma'am. You still remember how to take orders from fighter jocks? She laughed short, genuine, startling Ryan. I remember how to ignore them, Major. Even in crisis, humor crackled through the static. The next 40 minutes were a test of endurance. Lightning flickered around them like restless spirits. Rain drummed in heavy bursts. Olivia kept the plane's nose true, adjusting for crosswinds the way a musician fine-tunes a note. Her body ached, but her focus never wavered. Ryan handled what systems remained. Hydraulic pressure dropping on the right. Manual override, she said. Give me tactile control. Captain, that'll tire you out. Already am. She gripped harder, eyes narrowing. Keep watch on descent rate. The aircraft shuddered again, but held course. Outside, the F-22s tightened formation, their navigation lights blinking rhythmic reassurance. Through the side window, Olivia caught a fleeting glimpse of one jet's tail number. Recognition jolted her. That's Ghost 2, she murmured. Lieutenant Perez. He was just a kid back then. Ryan blinked. You know him? Saved his squad from a hillside ambush. Small world, huh? At Dover, crews were clearing the old secondary runway. The base's weather tower reported crosswinds at 15 knots, ceiling 500 feet, barely acceptable. Command relayed the figures to the Raptors, who relayed them to Olivia. Not ideal, Ryan muttered. Never is, she said. We'll make it work. She switched to cabin intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We've made contact with the United States Air Force, and we're being guided to Dover Air Force Base. Conditions will be rough, but we're in good hands. I need everyone calm and seated. We're almost home. Her voice steady, grounded, rolled through the cabin like warm light. Panic ebbed into silence. People believed her, even if they didn't know why. When she clicked off the mic, Ryan exhaled. You sounded like you believed it too. I have to, she said. Belief's part of flying. As they neared the coast, the cloud cover began to fracture, revealing streaks of moonlight on the ocean below. The Raptors banked slightly, signaling course adjustment. Dover lay somewhere beneath that shifting darkness. Ghost 1 to Hawk, we're locking radar beacon on runway 12. You'll catch the glide slope in 5 mics. Roger that. We're light on fuel, so we'll make the first approach count. Ryan stared at her profile, jaw tight, eyes bright with purpose. He finally understood why the F-22s followed her without question. Down at the base, rescue trucks lined the tarmac, red lights rotating through the mist. Soldiers and firefighters waited silently, scanning the horizon for a wounded bird they couldn't yet see. Then the radar operator called, "Contact 2 Raptors and 1 heavy inbound." 20 miles out, the colonel stepped to the window, whispering almost to himself. Bring them home, Hawk. Up above, the descent began. Olivia lowered flaps manually. The lever creaked under strain. Speed 210, flaps 15. Copy. The altimeter wound down 10,008.6. The storm returned in one final tantrum, slamming the plane sideways. Ryan cursed, gripping the console. Olivia held the yoke firm. Stay with me. Outside, the F-22s broke formation, dropping to flank both wings. Their strobes pulsed white and red, tracing a glowing path through the darkness. Ghost 1 to Hawk, you're clear all the way down. We've got eyes on the strip. Visual acquired, she said, spotting a faint thread of light through the rain. Runway in sight. The airliner trembled, engines whining, but she never loosened her grip. The storm clawed at them like a living thing, desperate to pull them back. Landing gear down, she commanded. Ryan flipped the switch. A groan, then the satisfying clunk of metal locking into place. 3 green, he said. Good girl, Olivia whispered again to the aircraft, to herself, to fate. They pierced the final cloud layer. Below, the runway lights shimmered in the mist like a necklace of fire. For the first time in hours, the passengers saw the ground. A collective cry rose, half relief, half disbelief. Final approach, she said. Let's finish this. High above, the Raptors peeled away, looping in protective arcs. Calloway's voice came one last time. We'll stay overhead until you're safe on deck, Hawk. welcome home. She smiled. Copy that, Ghost One. Let's make it a soft landing. The nose dipped slightly. Rain streaked across the glass. Every motion now was slow, deliberate muscle, memory, faith. Below them, the runway widened, waiting. Olivia lined up the crosshairs, breath steady. Touchdown in 3. Ryan counted. 2, 1. The wheels kissed concrete hard. The jolt of the landing shook every rib of Flight 2971. The wheels screamed against wet concrete, spray exploding from beneath the fuselage as the rain hammered down. For 3 breathless seconds, it seemed the aircraft would skid off the runway, but Olivia held the yoke steady, guiding it like a beast on reins. The engines roared, reversers kicking in with a metallic snarl, and the plane slowed, tires biting the slick surface. In the cabin, silence turned to a trembling cheer. A child cried. Someone clapped, then another, until applause rippled through the aircraft like a heartbeat restarting. The passengers looked around, teary-eyed, realizing they were alive. Ryan leaned back in his seat, chest heaving. "We're down," he whispered. Olivia didn't answer at first. She simply stared ahead at the glowing runway lights, the rhythmic flash of the F-22s circling above. Then she exhaled deeply, her fingers loosening from the yoke. "Not yet," she murmured. "Let's see if she stops." The plane finally rolled to a shuddering halt halfway down the runway. The wipers squealed across the windshield. Beyond the cockpit glass, emergency vehicles, fire trucks, ambulances, ground crews in neon vests rushed toward them, their lights bouncing off the mist. Ryan turned to her, eyes wide with admiration. "Captain Jensen, I don't think anyone else could have done that." Olivia smiled faintly, but didn't bask in the praise. Her voice was quiet, almost absent. "The storm just gave us back what it owed." The radio crackled. "Flight 2971. This is Dover Ground Control. Welcome home, Captain. You're safe to taxi when ready. Runways clear." She keyed the mic. "Copy. Ground. Appreciate the light show. Captain." The voice paused, emotion-breaking protocol. "It's an honor to have you back in the skies, ma'am." Olivia's eyes flicked up, startled. She recognized the tone, even through static, a mixture of disbelief and respect she hadn't heard in years. "Do I know that voice?" The reply came softly. "Lieutenant Graham, ma'am. I was in your squadron in Kandahar. You taught me my first crosswind landing." Ryan blinked. "Kandahar? You were Air Force?" Olivia gave a short nod. "Once." As ground crews rolled stairs to the cabin door, the F-22s began their descent, circling low above the base before touching down on parallel strip. Through the rain-specked windshield, Olivia watched their sleek silhouettes vanish into the mist. "Ghost 1 and 2 on deck," came a radio confirmation. "They're requesting permission to meet the captain." She didn't answer. For the first time that night, her composure cracked. A flicker of uncertainty, something like dread, passed over her features. Ryan noticed. "You okay?" "I didn't plan on being recognized," she said quietly. "Some ghosts should stay in the clouds." Inside the cabin, Jenna unlatched her belt and stood, tears streaking her face. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said into the intercom, voice trembling, "we've landed safely at Dover Air Force Base. Please remain seated while emergency crews secure the aircraft." Applause erupted again, raw, unfiltered relief. Passengers hugged, cried, whispered prayers. One older woman pressed her forehead against the window, watching the blinking runway lights through tears. When Jenna entered the cockpit, her eyes were red. "Captain, they want to see you out there. The passengers, the rescue teams, everyone's asking who you are." Olivia gave a small shake of her head. "Tell them I'm just a pilot doing her job." But Jenna smiled knowingly. No, ma'am. You're something else entirely. Minutes later, Olivia stepped out onto the metal stairs, rain tapping against her uniform. The night air hit her face cool, heavy with the smell of fuel and lightning. Around the tarmac, floodlights cut through fog, illuminating the aircraft like a monument. Firefighters waved. Mechanics clapped. Soldiers saluted. Behind her, the passengers began to disembark, faces pale but glowing with gratitude. Some stopped to thank her personally. A child wrapped in a blanket whispered, "You're my hero." Olivia crouched slightly, meeting the boy's eyes. "You're the brave one. You trusted us." His mother's eyes brimmed. "You saved us all." Olivia only smiled softly and stood again, hands clasped behind her back. From across the tarmac, two figures approached through the mist flight suits dark with rain, helmets tucked under their arms. Even before they reached her, she knew who they were. The way they walked, heads high but respectful, told her everything. "Captain Jensen," Major Calloway said, stopping just short of her. His voice was steady, but carried the weight of years. "Permission to speak freely?" "Always," she replied. He smiled faintly. "You haven't changed a bit. Still flying through hell like it's just weather." Olivia chuckled softly. "And you still break radio silence whenever you get sentimental, Major." Behind him, Lieutenant Perez grinned. "Ma'am, I didn't believe it was you until I heard your voice on comms. Eagle 27. That's a name we thought was retired." She looked at them both. "It should have stayed that way." The Major studied her expression. "You disappeared after Helmand. No trace, no transfer. Command said you took early discharge." "I did," she said. "I'd seen enough fire for a lifetime. But you still fly." Olivia glanced back at the battered 737. "Some fires never go out. You just change what you're trying to save." Perez nodded slowly. "Tonight you saved 200 souls, ma'am. That storm would have torn the wings off any lesser pilot." She exhaled, letting the words sink in. "Maybe I didn't save them alone. You two lit the path." Calloway's voice softened. "You lit it first, Captain. Years ago." The moment was broken by the arrival of the base commander, a tall man in a soaked overcoat, silver hair plastered to his temples. He approached with purpose and saluted sharply. "Captain Jensen," he said. "Welcome back to Dover. I was told to expect an emergency landing, not a legend." Olivia looked uncomfortable at the word. "Sir, I'm just grateful we made it down." "You did more than that. You prevented a disaster. The FIA's already aware, and they'll want your statement once the passengers are cleared. But for now," he gestured toward a nearby hangar glowing with light, "we've got warmth, coffee, and dry uniforms waiting." Ryan stepped beside her, shoulders squared, but eyes wide at the military formalities surrounding her. "Captain, you didn't tell me you were famous." Olivia gave a rueful smile. "It's a long story. Maybe someday I'll tell it on a clear night." As they walked toward the hangar, Calloway and Perez flanked them like silent guardians. The storm was finally fading, clouds thinning to reveal a pale slice of moon. The air smelled of wet asphalt and jet fuel, a scent Olivia had known most of her life. Inside, the hangar buzzed with controlled chaos. Medics examined passengers. Reporters waited outside the perimeter fence. An airman rushed to photograph the scarred 737. Someone handed Olivia a towel and a cup of steaming coffee. Ryan sat beside her, still shaking from adrenaline. "You ever going to tell me who Hawk really is?" Olivia looked down at the cup in her hands. Hawk was someone who flew, because she had to prove she could. She saw men fall out of the sky and swore she'd never let gravity win again. He frowned gently. "That sounds like a ghost talking." She smiled sadly. Maybe it is. Outside the hangar, the two F-22s gleamed under floodlights, their metal skins streaked with rain. Ground crews worked quietly around them, reverent in their proximity to both history and miracle. Major Calloway lingered nearby, radio pressed to his ear. "Command wants confirmation on the incident report," he told Perez. "They're calling it the miracle at 20,000 feet. Perez grinned. "Fitting, sir. She saved them all." Calloway looked toward the hangar doors, where Olivia sat in silhouette. "She saved me once, too. Some debts never expire." A few hours later, the storm finally moved east, leaving the base wrapped in fog and silence. Most passengers had been transported to lodging. The runway lights dimmed. Olivia remained awake, seated by a window in the officer's lounge, staring out at the sleeping tarmac. Her call sign Eagle 27 echoed faintly in her head, a memory she had buried but never escaped. She thought of the desert night years ago, when a transport plane she piloted had taken enemy fire. Half her crew didn't make it back. That was the night she swore off combat, and the night the Air Force gave her the name Hawk. Now, after years of flying civilians through clear skies, she had been dragged back into a storm and saved lives again. Maybe, she thought, fate didn't care what wings you wore. It only cared that you remembered how to use them. As dawn approached, Major Calloway entered quietly. "Couldn't sleep?" Olivia shook her head. "Not after that kind of night." He leaned against the window beside her. "They're calling you a hero again. I don't want that." "Too late," he said, smiling faintly. "Heroes don't get to choose." She looked out at the horizon, where the first light bled through the clouds. "Maybe, but tomorrow, I'm just a pilot again. Someone has to get those people home." Calloway nodded, eyes soft with respect. "Then the sky's still yours, Hawk." She didn't argue. She just watched the sunrise gold spilling across wet concrete, touching the planes, the hangar, and the silent world she belonged to. For the first time in years, she felt peace not because she'd escaped the storm, but because she'd flown through it. UT true. By sunrise, Dover Air Force Base was no longer quiet. Satellite trucks lined the perimeter, journalists huddled under umbrellas, and flashing cameras reflected off the soaked tarmac. The world had heard the story. Commercial pilot saves 200 lives in mid-air, and they wanted to see the face behind the miracle. Inside the hangar, Olivia Jensen sat on a folding chair beside the dented fuselage of Flight 2971. Her uniform jacket hung loosely on her shoulders. Sleeves rolled, a faint grease smudge across her cheek. She hadn't slept. Every few minutes, someone new approached her. A mechanic, a medic, a soldier, each one wanting to shake her hand or thank her. She smiled, nodded, and said the same thing every time. We all got lucky. Ryan entered carrying 2 coffees. "Here," he said, handing her one. "You look like you could use it." She accepted it with a small smile. "Thanks. Any word from the passengers?" "Most have been taken to hotels in town. A few reporters tried to get interviews, but the base security's holding them off." He paused, lowering his voice. "They're calling you the miracle captain. Some even figured out your old Air Force record." Olivia froze mid-sip. "They did what?" "Yeah, the name Hawk is trending already. Somebody leaked that you were a decorated pilot." She sighed and set the cup down, staring at the floor. "That's the one thing I didn't want." Moments later, a military police officer entered. "Captain Jensen, you're requested in the briefing room. The FAA investigators just arrived." Olivia rose, her back straightening instinctively into military posture. "Understood." To Ryan, she said quietly, "You stay here. This might take a while." As she walked down the corridor, the smell of jet fuel and metal mixed with the faint aroma of coffee from the mess hall. Every step echoed like a heartbeat. She'd faced worse interrogations before. After missions where not everyone came back, but this felt different. This time, she wasn't wearing the uniform of war. She was just a pilot trying to get her passengers home. The briefing room was small, windowless, and bright with fluorescent light. 3 people waited. A woman in a dark FAA blazer, a military investigator in camouflage, and an older man with silver hair and reading glasses. Captain Olivia Jensen, the older man began. We want to thank you for your extraordinary actions last night. We just need to understand what happened up there. Olivia said. Of course, sir. The woman nodded politely. We've reviewed preliminary radar and communications. Your aircraft lost both primary systems, correct? Yes, severe lightning strike. Knocked out navigation, partial hydraulics, and comms. We were flying blind for about 5 minutes. And you made the call to continue east? That's right, she said. Returning west would have put us back into the storm's core. East was the only chance. A military investigator leaned forward. You used a call sign during radio contact, Eagle 27. That's not standard for civilian use. Olivia hesitated. Old habit. He arched an eyebrow. An Air Force habit? Her jaw tightened. Yes, sir. I served 12 years. Habit dies hard when you think the sky's about to fall. The room went silent for a beat. Then the older man leaned back, studying her face. I read your file this morning. Distinguished Service Cross. Operation Iron Shield. You brought a burning C-17 down with both engines gone and a third of your crew still alive. Frankly, that's legendary. Olivia's eyes flicked downward. That's the past, sir. He nodded slowly. Perhaps. But yesterday, that past saved 200 civilians. So if you don't mind, we'd like the full flight report. Every detail. For the next 2 hours, she went through it. The turbulence, the system failures, the moment she saw the Raptors, the way they guided her in. Her tone never broke. She spoke like she was reading coordinates off a chart. When she finished, the FAA officer looked stunned. Captain Jensen, you realize you broke at least 6 procedural rules? Olivia gave a small shrug. If I hadn't, you'd be writing an obituary, not a report. The woman hesitated, then smiled faintly. Fair point. The military investigator closed his notepad. We're recommending commendation, not discipline. You may want to brace for media attention, though. Olivia sighed. I'd rather brace for turbulence. Outside the briefing room, Ryan waited anxiously. When she stepped out, he straightened. How bad? They're not charging me, she said dryly. Apparently saving lives offsets breaking rules. He grinned. So what happens now? Now, she said, we get those passengers back to their families. By afternoon, the sky had cleared completely, blue and endless, as if mocking the chaos of the night before. The 737 was grounded for inspection, its left engine scorched and fuselage pitted with lightning burns. But the passengers were safe. And so, for the first time in nearly 24 hours, Olivia felt the exhaustion crash over her. She sat alone on a bench near the airfield fence, watching the distant F-22s being towed to hangars. Each movement reminded her of another life. The hum of turbines, the smell of hydraulic oil, the sound of her crew joking before takeoff. Those memories, long buried, clawed their way back. She remembered Helmand, the night her C-17 was hit. They were ferrying wounded soldiers out of a combat zone when enemy fire tore through the wing. The cockpit filled with smoke. Her co-pilot, a kid barely 23, had screamed, "We're hit! We're losing hydraulics." She'd gritted her teeth and said, Then we fly on muscle and prayer. They'd made it halfway home before one engine gave out. The rest is what made her a legend and broke her. She landed that burning bird in the dark, with half her controls gone, saving 20 men. But she still remembered the faces of the 5. She couldn't. That was the night she quit the Air Force. The night Hawk died. Captain Jensen, a familiar voice called. It was Major Calloway, still in his flight suit, helmet under one arm. She turned. Major, you didn't leave with your unit? He smiled. Command's letting us stay for debrief. I figured you might need company. Company or interrogation backup? He chuckled. Maybe both. He sat beside her, silence stretching between them for a moment. Then he said, You know, the last time I saw that look on your face was after Helmand. She didn't answer. You saved lives again, Liv, he said quietly. But you still look like you lost something. She stared at the sky. Because I did. I lost the quiet I'd finally found. Calloway nodded slowly. The sky doesn't let go easy, does it? No, she whispered. It never does. They sat in silence, the hum of the bass a distant heartbeat. After a while, Calloway pulled something from his pocket, a small weathered patch embroidered with a hawk silhouette. He held it out to her. You dropped this in Helmand, he said. I kept it all these years. Thought you'd want it back. Olivia stared at it. The edges were frayed, the colors faded. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Then she took it gently, her voice barely audible. You kept this? He nodded. We all did. You were more than our captain. You were our compass. She traced the patch with her thumb. Compasses break, Major? Maybe, but sometimes they find north again. Her throat tightened. She looked away, blinking hard. You're still sentimental. Occupational hazard, he said, smiling. That night, when the passengers finally boarded a replacement jet, Olivia stood by the stairs, watching them file in. Each face reminded her that the hours of terror had become a lifetime story for them. Some waved. Some whispered thanks. A few simply nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Ryan came up behind her. You're not coming with us? She shook her head. I'll follow later. There's paperwork and old ghost to put to rest. He hesitated. They'll miss you on the flight home. She smiled faintly. Tell them the sky's calmer now. That's all they need. As the jet taxied away, she stayed on the tarmac, patch in hand, feeling the soft wind against her face. It wasn't silence anymore. It was peace. A different kind. That night, as the base lights dimmed, Olivia returned to the hangar one last time. A damaged 737 sat under floodlights, a monument to survival. She climbed into the cockpit and ran her fingers across the console, the same one that had carried 200 lives through chaos. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass. Not Hawk, not Captain Jensen, just Olivia, a woman who had wrestled the storm and won. She smiled softly. You did good, girl, she whispered to the aircraft. Now rest. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of distant engines, the sound of the F-22s lifting off for morning patrol. She looked up through the canopy, where the stars shimmered like runway lights in heaven, and whispered, See you up there, boys. Then she walked away, slow, steady, and lighter than she'd felt in years. The morning after the rescue, the story had already gone viral. Hero pilot saves 200 lives in mid-air. The return of the call sign, Hawk, from war hero to airline savior. Every major news outlet had plastered her photo, some from her Air Force days, others from blurry cell phone footage taken after landing. To the public, she was a legend reborn. To Olivia Jensen, it felt like her worst nightmare crawling out of the shadows. She sat in a small room at the Dover Air Force Base Hotel, the curtains drawn tight, television muted, but flashing her own face every few seconds. Coffee had gone cold on the table. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Messages from old crewmates, journalists, even politicians. She didn't answer any of them. The only knock she couldn't ignore came around noon. When she opened the door, she found Major Calloway standing there, still in his flight suit, a man who carried both sympathy and purpose in his eyes. "Thought you might be hiding," he said softly. "I'm not hiding," she muttered, stepping aside to let him in. "Just thinking." He smirked. "You? Thinking? That's dangerous." She rolled her eyes, though a faint smile tugged at her lips. "You didn't come here to joke." "No," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I came to warn you." Olivia's brow furrowed. "Warn me about what?" "The Pentagon's reopening your record," he said. "When your call sign came up on radar last night, it triggered an old classified protocol. Command wants to know how your name showed up again, after all these years." Her stomach dropped. "You're kidding." "I wish I were. They're calling it a breach of legacy code." Olivia exhaled slowly, pressing her hands to her temples. "I thought that file was sealed." "It was. Until you shouted Eagle 27 across civilian airspace." Her voice hardened. "I didn't shout it. I said it to stay alive. Instinct." Calloway nodded. "And instinct saved 200 people. But now Washington wants answers." She stood, pacing the small room. "Of course they do. The second you do something good, they dig until they find something to question." He rose too, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. "You didn't do anything wrong, Lev. But there's more. The Raptors that guided you in? One of their pilots. He used to serve under your old squadron." Olivia froze. "What?" "Yeah," Calloway continued. "His name's Captain Andrew Beckett. Calsign, Falcon. He was a rookie back in Iron Shield. He said the moment he heard you on the radio, he knew it was you." Her throat went dry. "Andrew Beckett. He was just a kid. He's a full-bird pilot now," Calloway said with a hint of pride. "Said you taught him everything he knows about flying through hell." Olivia's jaw tightened. "And now he's the one who pulled me out of it." Later that afternoon, the Air Force press office arranged a joint debrief. Olivia, Major Calloway, and Captain Beckett via video link. The room smelled of paper, coffee, and bureaucracy. Screens glowed with insignias and digital maps. When Beckett's face appeared, he looked older, weathered by time, but smiling like he'd just seen a ghost he'd missed. "Ma'am," he greeted, voice steady but warm. "I can't tell you what it meant hearing your voice last night. It brought me right back." Olivia gave a small nod. "You shouldn't call me ma'am. I'm just a commercial pilot now." He shook his head. "Not to me. You'll always be Captain Hawk." There was silence, the kind that carries 100 memories. Beckett continued, "When we picked up your signal, we didn't know it was civilian. But the way you handled that storm, the way you coordinated vectors under zero nav control, I knew. No one else flies like you." Olivia looked down, unable to meet his gaze. "I just did what I had to." Calloway leaned forward. "She always does." The Air Force liaison interrupted. "Captain Beckett, your log shows you deviated from formation protocol to escort flight 2971. That decision could have cost you your commission." Beckett didn't blink. "I'd do it again." "Sir, with all due respect, if Hawk hadn't guided that plane, we'd be looking at wreckage over the Atlantic." The liaison scribbled something on a notepad. "Duly noted." Olivia's eyes softened. "You saved us too, Captain." "You and your wing." Beckett smiled faintly. "Guess we're even now." That night, after the meeting, Olivia stood outside under the dim glow of the base lights. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, though the skies were clear. Calloway joined her, hands in pockets. "They want to reinstate you?" he said casually. She turned sharply. "Excuse me?" "The Air Force," he clarified. "They're offering you an honorary return, a public ceremony, interviews, medals, the whole thing. The return of Hawk, their words, not mine." Olivia shook her head. "No, I left that world for a reason." "You left because of guilt," he said gently. "But that guilt doesn't erase what you've done since. The world's finally remembering you for the right reasons." She laughed bitterly. "The world doesn't remember. It consumes. It'll turn my story into headlines and move on." "Maybe," he said, stepping closer. "But those 200 people won't." She looked up at the stars, faint, distant, indifferent. "I didn't do it for them to remember me. Then why?" he asked softly. Her answer came almost as a whisper. "Because when the storm hit, I heard their screams, and I remembered mine." Inside her chest, something cracked open. She'd buried the memory for years, that deafening chaos of her C-17 falling apart mid-air, the sound of metal tearing, of voices fading. Every nightmare since had replayed it. Her co-pilot's trembling hand, the smell of burning fuel, the last words in her headset, "We're not gonna make it." But she had made it. And that was the wound. Survivor's guilt was its own battlefield. Calloway didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just stood there beside her, sharing the silence like only soldiers could. Finally, Olivia broke it. "You think the Air Force believes in redemption?" He smiled faintly. "The sky always does." The next morning, she received a call from the FAA, a request to appear before Congress for an official commendation. She laughed, dry and humorless. Hero one day, headline the next. She agreed anyway. In Washington, the chamber was packed. Cameras lined every corner. Senators spoke in practiced tones about bravery, skill, and national pride. Olivia stood there, rigid, her hands clasped behind her back, every fiber of her being wanting to fade into the background. When she was finally asked to speak, she took a breath. "I didn't save 200 people because I'm special," she said. "I did it because I was terrified. But fear isn't the enemy. It's the reason you fight harder to see the light again. We all have storms. The trick isn't avoiding them. It's flying through them, one heartbeat, one decision, one prayer at a time." The room fell utterly silent. Then applause erupted, loud, raw, human. She didn't smile. She just nodded once, eyes glistening. Afterward, as she left the building, a small girl ran up to her, maybe 7 years old, clutching a toy airplane. "Are you the lady who saved my daddy?" she asked. Olivia knelt, startled. "What's your daddy's name?" "Mr. Evans," the girl said proudly. "He said you were brave." Olivia smiled softly and touched the little plane. "No, sweetheart. Your daddy was brave. I just made sure he got home." The girl grinned, then hugged her before running back to her mother. Olivia stood there, stunned, and for the first time since the night of the storm, tears came freely. They weren't from pain. They were from release. That evening, back at her hotel, she looked out the window at the Potomac River shimmering under city lights. Her reflection stared back, older, scarred, wiser. On the desk beside her sat the worn hawk patch. She picked it up, tracing the outline with her thumb. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. It read, "We still fly with you, Hawk, 27th Squadron." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Of course you do," she whispered. The storm outside was gone. But inside her, for the first time in years, it was calm. 2 weeks after the congressional hearing, Olivia Jensen's life had turned upside down. Airlines wanted her for interviews. Documentaries called. Book agents, podcast hosts, and producers flooded her inbox. The world had turned her into an icon, a calm voice in chaos. But behind the calm, something didn't feel right. Every time she turned on the news or scrolled through social media, she saw her old call sign, Hawk, printed in bold. The problem was, she had never told anyone that name. Only the Air Force knew it. And if the Air Force's classified call sign database had been accessed, it meant someone went digging. That realization came back to her late one night in her Washington apartment. She was sitting in front of her laptop, reading yet another article, glorifying the miracle in the storm, when a small notification blinked on her screen. Encrypted message received. Sender, unknown military network. Her pulse quickened. She opened it. The text was short and chilling. They never deleted your file. You were never retired. They just changed your status. Meet me at Hangar 47 Dover. Midnight. Come alone. 5. Her hands trembled. F. Falcon. At exactly midnight, Olivia drove through the empty base under the cover of darkness. The guard at the gate recognized her immediately. Evening, Captain Jensen, he said with a respectful nod, unaware of why she was there. She forced a polite smile. Just checking on something. Inside Hangar 47, the air was cold, smelling faintly of oil and steel. Rows of old aircraft sat under tarps, their once proud insignias faded. She spotted a lone figure standing beside a dim workbench light, Captain Andrew Beckett, Falcon himself. He turned as she entered, his expression serious. You came. I almost didn't, she said, stepping closer. What's this about, Beckett? He handed her a folder, plain, brown, with a red stamp across the front. Classified, Level Omega. Olivia hesitated before opening it. Inside were photocopies of old mission reports. Operation Iron Shield, 2012. Her name appeared at the top of several pages. But one line, stamped diagonally across the front, made her freeze. Status: active, shadow clearance pending. Her stomach dropped. This can't be right. I resigned. Beckett shook his head. No, ma'am. According to the internal system, you were reclassified, not discharged. Your clearance was buried under a shadow division. Shadow division? She repeated, eyes narrowing. That's Black Ops territory. Exactly, he said. And your call sign, Hawk, is still coded in their database as an emergency identifier. When you used it during the storm, it triggered a dormant defense network. Olivia's blood ran cold. You're telling me that when I asked for help, the system thought I was still in service? He nodded grimly. That's why the F-22s came so fast. You weren't just a pilot in distress, Liv. You were a classified operative reactivated by accident. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of distant turbines. She stared at the papers, memories flooding back. The covert missions, the strange orders, the sealed debriefs she was never allowed to keep copies of. The night she crash-landed the C-17 in Helmand wasn't just a rescue, it was a secret retrieval mission. And someone had made sure those details never surfaced. Olivia slammed the folder shut. Who knew about this? Beckett hesitated. Command denies everything. But I did some digging, off the record. There's one name that keeps coming up in the files. General Marcus Vance. The name hit her like a gut punch. Vance, her old commanding officer. The man who'd signed her discharge papers. The man who told her she was free. He's the one who made me believe it was over, she whispered. Beckett nodded. He's retired now. But he's been consulting for a private aerospace firm, one that's under contract with the Pentagon. Olivia's expression hardened. He used me. The next day, Olivia didn't go to work. She didn't answer calls, didn't check messages. She spent hours driving through D.C. in silence, her mind spinning with questions. How many missions had she flown without knowing the real objective? Why had they buried her status instead of officially discharging her? And most of all, why now? By evening, she had her answer. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A deep, familiar voice filled the line. You should have left it buried, Captain Jensen. Her breath caught. General Vance. You were never meant to fly again, he said calmly. The world needed a hero that night, and you filled that role perfectly. But don't confuse public admiration with freedom. You still belong to us. She snapped. You mean the people who lied to me? Who turned me into a ghost? Watch your tone, he warned. You have no idea how many lives your silence protects. Olivia's anger surged. 200 people lived because I broke silence, General. I'm done being quiet. There was a pause. Then Vance's tone darkened. Then you've made yourself a target again, Hawk. And this time, no storm will save you. The line went dead. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her apartment felt colder, the shadows longer. Every sound, a car passing, a door creaking, made her nerves tighten. Finally, she pulled the folder back out and spread the contents across her desk. Maps, photos, flight manifests. One document caught her eye, a coded transmission log marked Operation Ghostline. It referenced Asset H-27, neutralized in 2012. Her hands trembled. Neutralized. That meant killed in action. And yet the asset ID, H-27, matched her service tag. They hadn't just hidden her record. They had declared her dead. At dawn, she called Calloway. He answered grudgingly, Lev? What's going on? I need to see you. Now, she said. Within an hour, they met at a quiet diner off base, far from military ears. Olivia slid the folder across the table. They never discharged me, Cal. They erased me. According to the records, I died 13 years ago. He flipped through the pages, his eyes widening. Jesus, this is treason-level secrecy. Vance orchestrated it, she said. He faked my death to hide Ghostline. What was Ghostline? He asked. Olivia hesitated. A rescue op. Or that's what I was told. But looking at this, she tapped the map. We weren't just pulling out soldiers. We were retrieving something. Something they didn't want the world to see. Calloway's jaw tightened. And now that you're public again, the past is catching up. Exactly. He leaned closer. So what's your plan? She met his gaze. To find Vance, and end this. That night, under the cover of darkness, Olivia returned to the skies. Beckett had arranged for a training jet, unmarked, off-book. She hadn't flown in military airspace since the day she left the service. As the engines roared to life, her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from clarity. For years, she had tried to run from her identity. Now, she was taking it back. Control, this is Hawk, she said over the headset, voice steady as iron. Re-engaging flight path. Heading 270. Beckett's voice came back through the static. Copy that, Hawk. Feels good to hear that again. The stars stretched before her like a runway of light. For the first time, she wasn't running from her past. She was flying into it. Below her, in a dark office at an undisclosed location, General Marcus Vance watched a radar screen. A blinking dot labeled H-27 moved steadily west. He frowned. She found a way back in. An aide beside him asked nervously, Orders, sir? Vance's expression hardened. Track her, but don't engage. Hawk Jensen may have forgotten who she was, but she's about to remember why she was erased. High above the sleeping world, Olivia Jensen gripped the controls tighter. Her call sign echoed once more through military channels long thought dormant. Eagle Command, this is Hawk. If you're listening, I'm coming home. The night sky over Dover was calm, almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing in Olivia Jensen's mind. She gripped the yoke of the unmarked jet, the cockpit humming with power. Beckett flew close behind her in a support aircraft, their communications silent except for occasional confirmation pings. For 13 years, she had been declared dead, erased from official records, and buried in secrecy. Now she was back, not to fade into another civilian life, but to reclaim her name, her legacy, and her truth. Her eyes tracked the blinking radar screen. Somewhere west, hidden behind layers of military bureaucracy, General Marcus Vance awaited. He had orchestrated her erasure to cover Operation Ghostline, a mission whose details had been kept from her even when she risked her life to complete it. Tonight, she would confront him. Hours earlier, in a shadowed command office in Virginia, Vance had been reviewing the anomaly reports. Hawk Jensen is airborne, he muttered to his aide. Do not attempt interception. Let her finish. The aide hesitated. Sir, are we letting a declared dead operative confront classified operations? Vance's eyes hardened. She's always been the wild card. If she's returned to life, we might as well see where she flies. This is her reckoning, not ours. Back in the cockpit, Olivia's pulse steadied. The storm that had defined her life, both literal and metaphorical, had honed her instincts. She initiated an intercept course to the coordinates in the folder Beckett had given her, a secluded airstrip deep in Virginia, where Vance had set up a private command hub. Beckett's voice came over the comms, calm and steady. Hawk, remember, we're here to support, not to engage. Eyes open, hands ready. Olivia nodded. Understood. But if he moves, I'll handle it. The jet cut through the pre-dawn sky, engines slicing the silence. Below, the patchwork fields and rivers glinted under the rising sun. Every mile brought her closer to answers and justice. She landed silently on the hidden strip, tires skimming a runway slick with morning dew. No lights, no guards, the kind of isolation that screamed of secrecy. Beckett followed shortly, landing with mechanical precision. They exited their jets and approached the compound on foot, the tall walls looming ominously. Inside, the room was dim, the air thick with the scent of polished metal and paper. And there he was, General Marcus Vance, older, graying, but still commanding, the same man who had once told her she was free. You came, he said flatly, not rising from his chair. I did, Olivia replied, voice steady. And I want answers. Everything about Ghostline. Why I was erased. Why my call sign is still active. Vance studied her quietly. Some truths are dangerous, Captain Jensen. You think you want them, but they carry consequences. Consequences I can live with, she said sharply. You can't erase me again. Vance leaned back, steepling his fingers. Ghostline was never a standard mission. You were retrieving high-value assets, scientists, technology, intelligence from hostile territories. Everything you thought was civilian transport was covert. Your death was fabricated to protect the operation and the people involved. Olivia's jaw tightened. So all those years you left me thinking I'd quit, thinking I was free, while I was dead in the system? Yes, he admitted. We monitored you. We needed your skills hidden, untraceable. And yet, somehow, you re-emerged. The storm activated your legacy identifier. It was like a beacon. Her fists clenched. You used me. You treated me like a pawn. My life, my freedom, all staged for your convenience. Vance's face remained impassive. I didn't use you. I preserved you. For what? She demanded. For who? He paused. For the country. For every life you've ever saved. Every life you might save in the future. She shook her head, stepping closer. No, General. I am not your asset anymore. Not your pawn. Not your ghost. I am Olivia Jensen, Hawk, and I decide who I save, who I fight for, and who I protect. Vance's eyes narrowed. You are still the same pilot who landed a burning C-17 in Helmand. You think you can walk away from destiny? I choose my own destiny, she said firmly. There was silence. The weight of history, missions, and secrets pressed down on them both. Finally, she turned, walking to the window overlooking the airstrip. The sun had fully risen, casting light across the runway. A new day. I'm done hiding, she whispered. No more secrets. No more shadows. The world knows Hawk Jensen exists, and I'll answer only to that truth. Vance remained seated, studying her. He gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. Perhaps. That is the lesson you were meant to learn. Courage is not just in flight, but in reclaiming your life. Olivia exhaled, a mix of relief and defiance. Then this chapter is over. Without waiting for permission, she returned to her jet. Beckett followed, offering a respectful nod. Engines roared to life once more. The wind swept across the airstrip, lifting her hair, tugging at her uniform. She gripped the yoke, feeling the old rush of adrenaline, but tempered by a new understanding. She wasn't just flying for survival anymore. She was flying for herself. High above the horizon, the two jets banked into formation, cutting through a sky untouched by storms. Beckett glided beside her, eyes scanning but calm. You ready? He asked over comms. Olivia smiled faintly. Always, but this time, I'm flying my own course. As they soared, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought of the 200 passengers she had saved. The little girl clutching her toy plane. Her Air Force squadron. Beckett, Calloway, the ghosts of the past. All those threads of life, fear, duty, and courage intertwined to bring her here, to the realization that heroism was not just in what you did for others, but in the strength to reclaim your own story. Back at Dover, news outlets continued to buzz about the miraculous rescue, the return of Hawk, and the pilots who guided her to safety. But Olivia had chosen silence. She was done answering to everyone else. The only record she acknowledged was her own, a journal of the flight, the names of the lives she had saved, and the hard-earned lesson that freedom was not granted. It was taken, claimed, and defended. Later that evening, as she returned to her apartment, Beckett pulled her aside. You know, he said, they'll always ask about your call sign. It'll follow you. Olivia smiled faintly. Good. Let them know. Hawk Jensen isn't gone. She's just alive? He grinned. Alive and still flying. Exactly, she said, glancing at the sky. Stars gleamed above the city, a reminder that no storm, past or present, could ever take her wings. She stood there a moment longer, breathing in the crisp night air, letting the memories, guilt, and triumph settle. Then, with a final glance at the horizon, she turned and walked inside. The past had tried to erase her. The storm had tested her. And yet, after everything, Olivia Jensen Hawk was finally free.